Hello and welcome to the Majority Podcast in a new time slot of 7 p.m. I'm your host, Mark Devlin, and this is Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist podcast. We've got a little bit of technical problem, so I'm just going to come back in one second.
We'll hold it over the now, David. Hello, everyone in the chat. Get your comments in early. We've got special guest Andy Morrison coming on. Andrew Morrison, sorry, a councillor for East Wren Council. So get your comments in early, guys.
Indeed. So let's see if Mark is.
As usual, we'll start with some kind of technical problem. And anyway, I'm glad you're still with us. We have a packed show for you today on Scotland's #1 anti-nationalist podcast. We're going out live on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. And I'm here with co-hosts Niall Fraser and David Griffiths. What are we going to be talking about tonight?
Hello. Tonight, we will be talking all about the Pretendy Ref, which the main parties are talking about boycotting. So we'll be discussing this with all of you good people and additionally with Councillor Andy Morrison.
Yes, and I'll be talking about the SNP Six Pestery again, but this time I'm joined with friend of the show, Rona Cameron.
And we're trying to keep the show on the road here, technical issues aside, and looking after the chat as well. Mary's not feeling very well today, but she is able to help us with that. So appreciate your support. What else are we going to have, David?
We, of course, have everyone's week, number of the week.
Great. So we will be back in just a moment. Go with us for now. Yeah, welcome back. And tonight's a big night because we've got two special guests. We have Councillor Andy Morrison. He will be joining us to talk about the Pretendy Refs. And not Pretendy Ref, just a Pretendy Ref. And also Rona Cameron is going to be talking about sex pests in the SNP, an ongoing topic that we are all very aware of. But first, we have started a new crowdfund to try and undermine and fight the Pretendy Ref. If you would like to see huge Boycott the Pretendy Ref billboards across Scotland, then please go to our website and donate. I will show a link for that in a second. We're also working on schemes to undermine Nicola Sturgeon's plans, demoralise her support using social media as well. So if you want to be involved in that, then please do donate. And finally, we are spearheading a People's Legal Challenge, getting started with QC's legal opinion. And so that is actually quite important. So we're trying to gather different groups together and get opinions on how we can attack and use any legal way of attacking Sturgeon's plans. So please do donate if you can. I'll show that in a second. We have a donate button at the top of our website. Just search for the Majority Scott or Majority Scotland. And it will pop up, and the donate button is right at the top. We have already raised over £1,500, so you will not be alone. Many people are already donating, so thank you for those as well.
Thanks indeed. And additionally, we'd like to thank our friends both at UK Union Voice and at United Against Separation for supporting the podcast by letting us broadcast directly to their Facebook pages, from where I know many of you are watching. So thank you very much, guys.
Okay, and you can also watch on YouTube. Now, we're doing a big thing now. Many of you are watching on Facebook. If you can, please do watch on YouTube. We need to get our subscriber numbers up as much as possible. So again, search on Google for the Majority Podcast, and then go to YouTube and subscribe if you can. Mash that subscribe button is what we're looking for. we get more subscribers we have, the better exposure we get. So you can be part of all that. Niall.
Yes, and please do like, share, comments. I see a lot of comments coming in already. Thanks very much. Tell your friends, extend our reach at the click of a button. The mere click of a button really does help us out. Good comments get read on the show, but try to keep them short because we can't display huge 50-word or 50 league essays. So get them in as quickly as you can, and we'll get as many out as we can.
Coming up, we're going to be talking to Councillor Andy Morrison about the Pretendy Ref, and after that, sex pestry. It's an ongoing topic. So we're back in just a second. Right, David, you're going to lead off here.
Yes, just on the subject of the Pretendy Ref, everyone, just to preface this discussion really, since last week, we've all seen and heard Nicola Sturgeon insisting that a referendum of some sort is going to take place next year. And she is promising to produce a series of papers to outline the SNP's route to a second independence referendum. So the big question is, why is she insisting that a vote must take place by next year when there is very clearly no demand for it among Scottish voters, and while there is additionally zero chance of the UK government granting the SNP a Section 30 order? So to help us explore this and other questions about the Pretendy Ref, which is how it's going to be known by us from now on, we are joined tonight by Andy Morrison, who was recently elected as a councillor for Newton Mearns North and Neilston Ward, which is part of the East Renfrewshire Council. So, Andy,
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Andy. Andy, of course, wrote some of the earliest articles for the majority. So, hello, and congratulations on your election. How does it feel to be a councillor?
It's been a long time coming for me, to be honest, David. It's been really, really rewarding so far in a way that the day job just isn't. It's, could be the most basic issues, but it still affects people's day-to-day lives. And it's quite a rewarding feeling that you can do something for them. And of course, here in East Renfrewshire, one of the first issues I had to contend with, I literally just got issued my council laptop, my council mobile phone, and I logged on, and it was about cuts to Isabel Mayor School, which is in my ward. Isabel Mayor School is a school for those with additional education needs, and the last SNP administration left us with a £62,000 cut, which means that the kids will lose 2 weeks of their summer placements. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, guys, especially when Nicola Sturgeon's sitting with £20 million up her sleeve for an independence referendum, and some of the most vulnerable kids in my community are going to go without for £62,000. Sickening.
Right. Yeah. Well, in your art, there was an article that was in the what's it called, Daily Express. Here we have it. I think. Just have a look here. East Renfrewshire Council reject illegal wildcat Sexit ballot, and but in that you do mention that the money should be. You think the money should be spent on kids, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like over the last 2 years, councils are strapped enough for cash as it is due to the SNP's cuts. The SNP will have cut £251 million from Scottish councils in real terms in this year. And I just don't think that councils can justify spending this money when Nicola Sturgeon's permarendum, as I call it, has no legal standing whatsoever, because we know that Westminster will not grant a Section 30 order. I don't see how a council can justify spending all of that money, closing schools to kids when they've missed so much after the pandemic, stretching council workers even more when they're still dealing with backlogs. Yeah, the amount of complaints I've had about bins not being emptied and grass not being cut because of COVID backlogs. But Nicola Sturgeon wants those councils to go without so they can facilitate her party political exercise, which is designed purely to appease her core support. It's like throwing them red meat, but it's not actually red meat. It's just, stale pun of mince that's months past its sell-by date.
Yeah, like an old fish supper or something like that, I guess. You say that there's no legal compulsion on councils to facilitate an illegal referendum. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually been a series of articles about this. So people like Ian Smart, for example, who knows far more about law than I do. I'm a trained accountant, who's pointed out Section 29 of the Scotland Act, which basically confirms in writing that anything which is not within the purview of the Scottish Parliament is a reserved matter. And that includes the Constitution, for example. So if there's no Section 30 order, anything that Nicola Sturgeon writes on this, anything that the Scottish Parliament puts through, will be ultra vires. It won't be law. It won't be worth the paper it's printed on. And I would actually go one further to say there is a legal compulsion on councils to follow what's called best value principles. It's basically to ensure that councils do not waste their money. Now, I would argue, what is the return on organising for a referendum, which we already know has no possible legal outcome before anyone's kicked a ball? And that's why I've said if the vote came up in the council, I would vote against it, and I would encourage everyone else who is an anti-nationalist to do the same.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of misconception about the way the law works. And certainly I would recommend people to have a look at Ian Smart's blog here. The blog isn't called Constitutional Thoughts from My Garden, but this particular post is, and it was just written a couple of days ago. And basically, he goes through all the different questions here. And the question 6 is the most important one. He says, so would it be up to the UK government to refer the matter to the Supreme Court? He says this is the common misconception, but basically he says that any legislation in terms of what you said, Andy, there in terms of the Section 29, if it's illegal, you can ignore it. Ordinary people can ignore it, and local authorities can ignore it, and so on. So the question then becomes, can they compel you? Can the Scottish Government compel you in some way to actually do it? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, from my own research, and I will add the heavy caveat that I am not a trained lawyer, but the Representation of the People's Act and the Political Parties Election and Referendum Act are the pieces of legislation which regulate holding elections. And anyone that's taken part in elections, as you know, a couple of fellow panelists here have been candidates for election themselves, they know that the regulations on candidates and including referendums is quite heavy stuff. And these are all pieces of UK legislation within Westminster. So if there's going to be an illegal vote, the question would be, well, the PPRA wouldn't apply. So what's going to regulate who can spend money and what they can spend? Who's given money and where's it being spent? So yeah, I don't see what the legal grounds would be for Nicola to then countersue councils for not doing it. And I feel we take on the point that like if there was a vote in my area, I would boycott it if it's illegal. But
the idea is a bit weird, isn't it? It's like we will sue you because you're not doing something that we're doing that's illegal. You know, that kind of vibe.
Well, exactly, and then it'd be down to individual local members to follow that. But the key principle is that these are reserved matters, they're not devolved matters. This is for the UK Parliament. It'll be made very, very clear that this bill, if it's brought forward, is ultra vires. It's out with the remit of the Scottish Parliament. It's an utter waste of money for any council when they don't have money going spare, to be frank, to be spending on this exercise.
The money's been cut already by the Scottish Government, right, to the bone. That's the problem.
Exactly. Councils have been cut to the bone, hence why the most vulnerable kids in my area are losing out in 2 weeks summer placement at Isabel Mayor School. It's only to save £62,000, which in the grand scheme of things is pocket money for a council. Yeah. However, this is what people have had to do because of the cuts that have come from the block grant. And I don't understand where these cuts are coming from, because Holyrood has the highest level of funding from the UK Parliament it's ever had.
Yeah, where is this money going? I suppose this is a big question. David, you got a question coming up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, in terms of the party the pro-UK parties in Holyrood, how do you believe they are viewing this? Do you think, for example, that Douglas Ross would encourage or instruct the Conservative MSPs to boycott the entire election process? Is that something you think is possible or likely?
It's a very good question, David. I mean, I know Douglas has come out and said that he would boycott an illegal referendum. And I'm not for walkouts of Parliament at this stage, to be honest with you, because those MSPs are there to represent the views of the majority, and they should be there until the last possible minute, because at the moment they're only discussing the concept of having a vote. So it's right that our views should be represented in our Parliament. However, if we're getting on to the stage where they are proceeding with something which is known to be illegal, then what's the point? That's the Parliament just wasting time, wasting money, because they're debating a piece of legislation that will never be legislation because it's illegal. So there's a case to say that maybe walking out at that stage would have more impact. But yeah, Douglas has said that he would boycott this if it's illegal, and I think that the others would follow suit. But I would actually like to go one further and ensure that councils don't waste their taxpayers' money, and they don't actually organise polling stations or polling agent clerks or waste any money on that, so people don't actually have the opportunity to take part in a legal vote.
Yeah,
very good. I think that's good.
Solution,
yeah. There's a going back a little bit. There was some chatter on Twitter today about a potential walkout. For example, Councillor Ian Gall says, "If I was in the chamber, I'd walk out to 20. We need to stop entertaining this delusional nonsense." And I think we actually ran a thing as well, asking people what they thought about it. But actually, one of the answers was really good. And actually, the person said, "Well, we don't need to walk out. We just ignore it, or at least say, well, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about cost of living crisis. We're going to talk about the things that actually matter to people in Scotland. Apart from, of course, this small rump of hardcore nationalists." So, yeah, I think what you're saying is that you have to. As political parties, you have to choose your moments, perhaps, and go with something that works at the right time.
Absolutely, it's always something that you get to really do once, and otherwise it just becomes a stunt, and stunts are more the domain of the SNP. To be honest with you, I think it's something. It should be done at a point where it would really, really count, and I think that would be the point where they're actually putting this forward, trying to approve it as a legal act of Parliament when it would be illegal. That would be the point to walk out, in my personal opinion.
Okay, Niall, I think you've got a question.
Well, there's a few quick questions coming out in the chat. Rita Johnson was asking if you think other councils will take your lead on this, Andy, and do the same. Especially in the cost-saving measures. I love what you said about the cost-saving measures. To me, it's most important that we didn't waste our taxpayers' money on frivolous things like pretendy refs, especially this. So, do you think other councils would take your lead in this?
I think there could well be. I mean, what we saw in the council elections back in May, and this is one for people who think that council elections don't matter. There's a number of SNP councils which have been overthrown because guess what, guys? The grown-ups are now in charge. And although myself, my two independent colleagues, and my Labour colleagues have very different politics ordinarily, we've recognised the need to give the area a reboot, a new administration, fresh leadership, and ultimately we have more in common than what divides us. It is, of course, easier to work with other parties at local level, where there's less party politics at play and a lot of local issues are just local issues. But I think it's a start. And a number of other councils across Scotland, I think such as South Lanarkshire, obviously Edinburgh City Council as well, where, potentially if there's an appetite for this, as things progress, this is something we could see in other places, and I would certainly very welcome that.
Yeah, certainly the Conservative councils are, I guess they might be up for it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Labour here. Whose question was this about the New Statesman? Was that yours, David?
Oh yeah, that's me. Yeah. I mean, a couple of articles this week have both pushed exactly the same line, which I thought was quite interesting. One was in the New Statesman, one was in the Times, Kenny Farquharson. They both had the suggestion that the reason that Sturgeon is rushing to hold some sort of referendum next year is because she foresees Labour winning the next general election. And the feeling among these two journalists, which they believe Sturgeon thinks also, is that Scotland will not vote for independence while there is a Labour government in Westminster. What do you think about that rather strange analysis, Andy?
I think it's an interesting one. I think that Nicola Sturgeon's been in a hurry to do this. Well, Alex Salmon before her as well. They've been in a hurry to do this since the day after 18th September 2014. And they've just been on to anything that they could. Brexit was one thing before Brexit. It was something else. Look, there's always been some excuse that they've been looking for. I don't quite agree with that analysis. I see where it's coming from, but I think whatever the opportunity is, this is something they try to push for. And to be frank, I think it's a diversion. It's a diversion away from Nicola Sturgeon's cost of living crisis. We have got oil and gas in the North Sea, which would be helping with their utility bills, but they can't extract it because they're in hock to the Green Party. Definitely a case of the tail wagging the dog. COVID recovery is failing in Scotland. We have extraordinary NHS waiting lists. We have a yawning attaining gap. We've got 2 rusting hulks sitting down the road in Port Glasgow. Nicola Sturgeon's looking for a diversion from all of the other failures. And guess what? It's that time of the year again when the independence referendum gets dusted down, and out it comes.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, if we say that Scotland doesn't just have a cost of living crisis; it has a cost of Sturgeon crisis. So there is so much. The 20 million is just it just seems like a cherry on top of a cake that's made up of wasted money. So. I wonder a little bit about, I think the timing is a bit strange because you don't normally go into a campaign for anything with so little momentum.
This isn't even a campaign. This isn't even a campaign, Mark. They have nothing new to say. All of the big unanswered questions from 2014 remain unanswered. How they're going to deal with the hard border with England, what currency would we use, who would be a lender of last resort. They cannot answer all of that stuff. All these years on, what this is basically about, this is still protracted grieving. This is the grieving process from losing in 2014. Right. Let's not kid ourselves here. This isn't any reboot of a campaign at all. They still haven't got over the fact that they've lost in 2014. And another thing that they have to get their heads around as well is in the referendum for 2014, that wasn't just the SNP's process. The whole of Scotland had ownership of that process. The vote for it in Holyrood was unanimous because even those who didn't support independence recognised they had a democratic mandate to hold one. And we said, you know what, bring it on. Wendy Alexander, if you remember that one some years ago. Yeah. So they brought it on and we won. The key difference between then and now is they think they can have it all their own way. It's not their referendum. It would be the whole of Scotland's referendum. We all have a stake in this. We all have an interest in this. It's not for them to call all the shots. And I think that's why the UK government is absolutely spot on to say there's no Section 30 order, because they're trying to uphold democracy and the democratic people's wishes of the first referendum and, of course, the promise. It was once in a generation.
Yes. I mean, but even at that, if they actually thought, okay, we can get past all that and they had a chance, but the polls are atrocious. Really, there's consent issue is one thing. The polls are terrible. We already had a referendum, as you say, so, and the party, as we'll talk about later, and as we talk about every week, is mired in scandal and incompetence. It's like you should go. And also, I should say as well, and we talked about this a few times, you've got a leader who's, really crabby about the whole thing. He's not a person you feel like is happy to do it and going forward. Well, here's a big opportunity. Here's all the hope and all this. It's like, why are you asking me questions about this? Are you a bad journalist person? And, it's like, well, wait a minute. You're the person who's selling an idea of hope for this new country, or whatever it is. So if you could even... That's their side, of course. We all say, well, actually, you're selling the breakup of the UK. It's a different thing altogether. And I think actually more people understand that as well. So there's a change in the way people think about Scottish independence. And as time goes on, especially with stuff like what's it called, Ukraine and so on, and people say, well, there's actually a big benefit to being part of the UK. Things that weren't that clear before becoming perhaps more clear. What do you any thoughts? More thoughts on that?
I mean, the big thing in 2014, if you remember, there were some crass comments from fairly senior SNP figures, Angus Robertson, for example, who presupposed that all we really needed to wait and do was for the pensioners to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And that demographic change would flip things in our favour. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I've lost older people in my life. Grannies, friends that have lost grannies, all that. We are 8 years on, and the polls are still the exact same as they were in 2014.
Worse,
and
maybe even.
If anything, Scotland has an ageing demographic. That's the argument Nicola trots out every time she says we want back in the EU for more economic migrants, etc. We have an ageing population. Well, if that's the case, things are actually going to get even more difficult for the Nationalists as we go further on down, because people are starting to claim their pensions faster than new voters are entering the electorate.
Mm-hmm.
And people change their opinions as they mature. And
well, they think. I mean, you think the referendum was 8 years ago, right? And all those people who were, like, say, young and in their early 20s and who were really for it now are in their mid-30s or beginning 30s, right? And they're starting to think, well, okay, I want to buy my house, a pension, think about my pension. All these things are starting to think about those. These people are the ones that are actually changing, and they probably are the ones who go say, well, I've seen a lot of these comments, well, we used to vote, we voted for that at that time, it seemed like a good idea then, but now that I'm a bit more grown up and time's gone past, then it's maybe not such a good idea. I think Niall was one of them. Are you one of those, Niall?
I mean, I voted yes in 2014 thinking it was a pro-Scotland vote, and obviously we lost. Or at the time, I was on that side. I say we lost. So you just have to come to terms with it. You move on. And then I was a Brexiteer. I thought we should have left Europe. We've won that one. And yet the Sturgeonistas of the world, they want to overturn a democratic vote in terms of the Indie Ref. And then again on Brexit, the folk, they're utterly nonsensical. They don't know what they're doing. They're rabid nationalists at every sensible opportunity.
If I can sum up in a sentence for you, basically they only like democracy when it goes their way.
Of course, that's very true.
Perfect.
Well, we've had a great discussion so far. I'm going to leave you with a final question, I guess, which is, how do you think the morale is in the Scottish Tory party right now? There's a lot of issues in the wider Tory party. Some people like Boris Johnson, some people don't. There's the whole ethics thing. There's lots of drama. Let's put it that way. And there's all whole thing going on.
If I was to give the Prime Minister one piece of career advice, if he wants to be absolutely cast iron guaranteed that he can do what he wants and he's not going to be sacked, he should join the SNP. Although that might be that might be a defection too far, to be fair. But
perhaps. But can you imagine Boris Johnson being in the SNP? Whoa, Jesus.
Wow.
That would be like...
I think you probably hear it in the intonation of my voice. All my colleagues are fairly bullish. We have our tails up. There's a job to be done over the next 5 years. We're all fairly happy with the leadership at all levels and getting on and doing a job for our constituents. Sadly, we did lose some good people. For example, former councillor Ewan Blockley,
who's a friend of the show.
Who's a friend of the show. He's on very recently. So it is a sad loss to lose good people like that through no fault of their own. But I would say spirits are pretty good just now.
Oh, that's good. All right, well, that's good. Well, we're looking for, whether you're a Tory or you're a Labour or Lib Dems, if we're all feeling positive and we all can feel that we are going forward and we can we've gotten some enthusiasm for beating the SNP and momentum, I think, on our side. That's where I feel we've got momentum. We feel strong. And they're always like saying, why you're so scared? Like, we're not scared, we're just bored, with your nonsense. That's the thing, we're bored with it.
It's tedious. It's tedious.
Very, very, very tedious.
Obviously, rather than trying to win the argument with us, I think they're just trying to bore us into submission.
Well, that's definitely true. You can follow Andy on
you don't
Twitter.
Have any danger of that in
go ahead.
Sorry, David?
David?
I was going to say, you don't think there's any danger of that happening, do you, Andy, in terms of Westminster's sake? If they want to go, why don't we just let them go? At least it would stop them moaning. I mean, you're not getting the feeling that that's anyway the sentiment in the Conservative Party in Westminster, are you?
I I don't think so, David. I mean, it's a valid concern, and other people have raised that concern before. But if you look at the heartache, for example, that Boris Johnson's gone through to try and keep Northern Ireland part of the union with the the Irish backstop, etc., trying to accommodate that situation with the Brexit negotiations, I think that Scotland matters very much, as does every constituent part of the United Kingdom matters very much, especially in a world which is looking more and more disunited by the day. We really need to work together. We are stronger together. We are better together.
Well said.
Thank you. You can follow Andy on Twitter. Just have look him up there, and of course we hope to have you back on the show again fairly soon to discuss any new updates, perhaps in what your council is doing to deal with particular issues or with this pretender ref. We'll see what it is. So big thank you to you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, guys, and break a leg. Good luck.
All right, thanks
Andrew.
Take care.
Cheers.
All right, bye. So moving on. Whoops, I'm trying to get back in space. I'm not moving for some reason. Moving on, we will come back in a second to talk with Niall and Rona, who are going to discuss the sex pestry at the heart of the SNP. If you like this show, please do go to YouTube and subscribe there. You can get alerts, and it'll tell you the podcast is live, and it'll pop up on your screen, and you'll be happy because you see our happy faces telling you things that you don't hear in any other show.
Yes.
So, coming up, it's going to be now, just in a second.
I'm switching my time.
We'll go on in a second, but the question is, will SNP sex pestry scandals ever end? I just don't think they're going to end at all, folks. I mean, tell me in the comments. I just have no confidence whatsoever. So let's start with a review of the Grady sex pest timeline. And please remember, folks, this is the party that espouses zero tolerance approach to sexual misconduct. So Patrick Grady was found to have and stroked the back of the neck and hair of a colleague in 17 years as junior at a social event in a pub in London in 2016, folks. 2016. And just this week, we're getting 6 years later.
Yeah.
Almost 6 years later. It's incredible. I know he spoke of the bespoke and generic training he received off the back of his misconduct. I wonder who paid for that. I wonder what it was called, actually. How not to be a lecherous creep training. It's better not. I mean, if it was us that paid for it as a taxpayer, there should be hell to pay. It's unbelievable. I mean, the fact he has to undergo training, he should be forced to resign immediately. I thought there was zero tolerance. Well, of course there's tolerance. Then, following on from Grady's shameful apology, we get a leaked recording. So someone in the SNP is clearly disgruntled. So if you would play the leaked recording, please, Mark.
Right, I've got that. I don't know if it'll come up straight up, but let's give it a go. Let's see how it goes.
I think we should be making sure that you feel supported at this point.
We give them as much support as possible.
We should be rallying together around him to support him at this time as well.
Rally around and support him.
So that's the gaggle of SNP MPs in Westminster applauding the support that they're giving Patrick Grady. And they're so livid. Blackford is livid that somebody had the balls to record that. It's unbelievable. It truly is. I mean, they're threatening legal activity to find out who the leaker is. I mean, the leaker needs a medal. Needs a medal. And I would encourage more leaks for SNP because, I mean, they're a sinking ship. There's going to be leaks spouting everywhere. So if we've got Rona on the line, are you there, Rona?
Hello.
Hi, Rona.
Hi there.
Hello,
Hello, good evening, everyone.
So Rona is a
How are
friend of the show, and she is working on the majority outreach, youth outreach fund. So thanks for coming on, first of all, Rona. But what's your initial thoughts on this Patrick Grady scandal?
Well, I think given that they've got a long list of sex pests within the SNP, what concerns me the most, any business worth its salt would be looking at how they deal with it. Now, they keep saying they're learning lessons. They're not learning lessons. What they tend to do is, whoever has been involved seems to disappear, or they say an apology, or they're learning lessons. Now, what kind of message is this giving out? This is people who are at top of our government who are behaving in this way, and their conduct's absolutely abominable. What message is this giving out to people, the young generation, of that you can behave, that it is abuse? I mean, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, and they're abusing people that are maybe junior to their position. And I think it's absolutely appalling. I think most people are absolutely appalled, not just appalled at what they've done, but appalled at how their leadership and how they're dealing with it.
Yeah,
I mean, you're the mother of two boys, so 16 and 18. I mean, what kind of effect do you think this has on kids in general?
Well, I think my two boys would be horrified. I have to say I was horrified and had to talk to them when it was the Derek Mackay scandal, because, how many, there are a lot of 16, 17-year-olds, they're very vulnerable still at that age. And to be getting a text to say how cute you are, this was somebody that was head of, finance, about to do a huge economic budget for Scotland the next day. So obviously, clearly his mind was elsewhere, and certainly not in a place that was appropriate. It was absolutely horrifying. And I think 16, 17-year-olds look at adults for trust, for guidance, for direction, and they're certainly not showing that in the SNP.
No, you can say that again, Rona. So what about you? See, your boys 16 and 18, were they required to fill out the sex survey that was going around the schools?
Yes. I mean, in regards to that, I believe that they did have the option not to do it if they didn't want to. But I think they were it was almost handed to them as though it was a done deal, that they were just all to sign it, or certainly fill it all in. I think from chatting to a lot of youngsters, they were very, very uncomfortable. And I don't think that was addressed. I think their well-being and emotional state of how they felt after it was never addressed. They're all into mental health and all the rest of it. But I don't think they actually asked many of the children how they felt about doing it. And I think I would say all the people that I've asked about it were very, very uncomfortable, almost squirming with embarrassment, having to answer these questions. I don't think adults would want to answer these questions. It's private. It was intimate questions being asked. It's absolutely outrageous.
David?
Well, whenever I asked the same questions of Mary Hunter and Nicola Sturgeon, I made one to the front page of the National. They said how distasteful I was being. I'm only asking the same questions they're asking our children. What's the problem, guys?
Well, I have to say, David, I found it really absolutely disgraceful that they were asking my children these questions. It's absolute. Where was that data going, actually? What was it for?
It's Derek Mackay's compiling it on his computer somewhere. Great question. Where is this data going?
Well, the fact that they have got so many sex pests within their organisation, then you would be starting to question why these youngsters are being involved with questionnaires like that. It's very, very, I would say, dubious, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a culture, isn't there? A culture of them looking the other way, and any indiscretion. It doesn't matter what they do, and we've seen that very clearly here, where we've had these forced apologies, and they're not even real apologies at all. So they're a big. It's just not really the way to.
But
be
what are they
dealing
actually doing to deal with the perpetrators? What are they doing to deal with them? They seem to just continue on and then go back into positions or shifted positions. You know, they're not actually dealing with, most businesses would have resignations, that would be the end of it. It's setting an example to the rest of the people, not only in the company, but if you're in government, you're setting an example to society that you're not accepting that behaviour. I mean, with all the Me Too movement kicking off, you know, this is all about protecting victims, and they're not doing that.
Well, I'll tell you what the SNP are doing, right? What they're doing is they're rallying the perpetrator. They're applauding that they're giving the perpetrator. What does that tell you about their party? It tells you that they're more concerned about themselves than the victims of their own crimes. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, this isn't the first instance of sexual misconduct with the SNP, not by any stretch. We've had a great many. We've had the Derek Mackay scandal you referenced. We've had the Patricia Gibson scandal. We've had the entire Alex Salmon Sleepy Cuddle court case. I mean, what I'm getting at, Rona, is this endemic of the SNP cult?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to be, doesn't it? And then we had also the drag queen that was brought into the nursery, which to most parents that have 5-6-year-olds is absolutely horrifying. I mean, why? Actually, the big question is why. The big question is also saying, why do they actually think that behaviour is acceptable? Why? And they need to be asked that question rather than letting them, you know, push it under the carpet, ignore it, an apology, learning lessons and moving on. They're clearly not learning lessons. They need to be asked why, and they need to be cornered to why this culture is allowed to continue within their party.
Well, the thing is, because, I mean, we talk about accountability, but who is actually going to force anyone to resign? Right? Where does the buck stop?
Where's Peter Murrell in this? He's the chief executive.
I know.
Where's Peter Murrell?
Well,
he should be the one.
I, as having run my own business and being a leader of people and directing people, Nicola Sturgeon, the buck should stop with her and how she handles it, and also the message that she's giving out to society, the next generation, on what is acceptable and what is not. She should stand up and say it's behaviour that is absolutely not going to be tolerated within our party, and these people should have been sacked.
Well, she did. The thing is, though, she did stand up. She says, "Oh, we've got a zero tolerance policy," and then it's like, "Oh, except for this guy. Oh, and except for that guy, and except for this woman, and except for this thing." You're like, "That's not a zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance policy. That's a disaster."
Exactly.
They got more angry at the weak. Sorry, they got more angry at the weaker than they did at Patrick Grady.
Of course, because they're caught. You know, how much else is going on that we just don't know about? You know, all the things they've been caught, they're horrified because, I mean, normally there's such close ranks. Goodness knows what they all know about each other. That's probably even more scary, how many skeletons are in the closet.
That's what keeps the party in check, I think, is they've all got...
Yes, everyone's too frightened to speak out, case there. CD sordid.
I don't even want to go there, man. Oh no!
Right, so that was okay. You had a good chat there, Rona. If you wouldn't mind putting your headphones in, we've got a little bit of sound issues, and then we'll come back in a second for the highlight of the week, which is Zimmer of the week.
Okay.
Right, as usual, Ron's disappeared now, so perhaps she'll come back in a second. So there's always some kind of technical issue, isn't there? But we persist because what we're trying to say is we've got something to say here. We're number one anti-Muslim show, and we need to push as much as we can. If you can help us by subscribing, by telling your friends and so on, then that's really great. So, okay, hold on a second. All right, we're still getting a few sound issues there. Let's see.
I think that's much better than Mark. I can feel it.
Yeah, I think
I'm not getting bombarded by stray audio waves.
Rona, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, that's much better.
Cool. Right, we're all good. Right, start up. Actually, Rona, you've got it first as Swimmer of the Week.
Oh, mine has to be Ian Blackford. I think that's that definitely for me is like unbelievable. That's a cracker to actually be almost condoning somebody's behaviour just to wriggle out of a ghastly situation to keep going.
Yeah, it's a bit of a.
I love comment, Rona. You know how I feel about Patrick. Yeah, we know exactly how you feel about Patrick.
We daren't ask.
Yeah, quite.
Right. Okay. Well, that's. I think Dave's going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. I think we're on to. A minute. It's going to be now.
Right, to the glorious majority audience, I've got a fantastic one this week. Absolutely stellar. So my Zoom of the week is Myri Hunter. So in the aftermath of the Grady scandal, Myri took to Twitter. And this tweet really does sum up the level of bile and hatred that nationalists bring to the table. The sheer cognitive dissonance that allows a statement like this. So Myri Hunter, she took to Twitter, and in response to the whole Grady situation, she says, I'm pretty confident about most of them, talking about the MPs in Westminster. I'm pretty confident about most of them in Westminster, but Westminster is a terrible environment. I wouldn't often use the word decadent, but this is apt. The sooner we get independence, the better.
God, they never stop,
right? Right? Seriously, right? So Myri is confident about most of the SNP Westminster MPs, but of course, it's the Westminster environment that's made Grady make these unwanted sexual advances towards teens. Sorry. You know, it's the Westminster. It imbibes, it espouses that sort of behaviour. It must do. I mean, it's a perfect example of SNP supporters who simply cannot lay blame on their own side. They just cannot do it. It's impossible. Never. And the default is to blame Westminster. But I mean, even in this case, even in this sexual misconduct case, Westminster somehow gets blamed.
Yep.
Can you believe this, folks? I mean, it's utterly delusional. It's deranged. It's deranged.
Well, they pulled out Mary Black today. I saw this thing where she's going. Where someone's
really
asking
dark,
her, "Oh, what's it like in?"
It's really dark.
Yeah, it's really dark there. You know, Westminster's a really dark place, and there's no doubt about it that there probably are some very entitled arses in that parliament. I mean, there's no doubt about it from any party. But that still doesn't excuse the blame of their people in their party. They're the ones causing abuse. They belong to them, so they need to be dealing with those ones. You can't be saying, "Oh, it's Westminster's fault that we got all handsy with me." You know, it's nonsense.
Well, I mean, what's her definition of dark? I mean, I think bringing a drag queen called Flowjob to read to the primary school kids is pretty dark. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. What's her definition of dark? It doesn't it doesn't correspond to what I think. I mean, this clearly it must be Westminster's fault that Patrick Grady is just delving into sexual deviancy. This is an SNP issue, plain and simple. It's got nothing to do with Westminster. It's got nothing to do with independence. Come on. I mean, this woman needs sectioned.
Well, if you imagine you went up to you were up for some sexual offence in front of the judge and you said, well, it wasn't my fault, it was Westminster. You know, what do you think would happen then?
You'd chuck the naughty bin.
Yeah, exactly. And this kind of constant grievance, people get tired of it after a while. They just say, well, it's not actually Westminster's fault, it's your fault. Have some own up at least. But they can't own up because their party rules basically say they're not allowed to criticise one another. That's one thing. So they're scared that they're going to be not necessarily the public's going to get them, but they're, as you mentioned, that there are fellow SNP MPs and MSPs are going to be against them, and then they're so scared of internal dissent. Now, the thing that I think is interesting in this is that there was a leak, right? And
there was one.
A leak. So somebody actually did something against them, and I think we're going to see many more leaks coming out as well. So that's a good sign. Myri Hunter, I mean, she lost her election. She's all butthurt. She's not going to get independent. She's not going to pretend ref. Who would want to be in that position? Coming up,
Indeed.
It's going to be David.
Okay, people, my nomination for the week this week is a joint nomination, and it goes to all the SNP members of Parliament who were in the Commons today sporting blue ribbons, led by Blackford, of course, who was very quiet today, very biscuit erst, as we say in Scotland, since his outing. He was among the people wearing a blue ribbon on his crumpled, ill-fitting suit. And so the purpose of the ribbon, of course, was to show support for victims of bullying in the workplace. How do you like that for cheek? This comes the very day after SNP ministers stated that the outcome of any misconduct complaint against SNP ministers or SNP figures should not be made public, whether or not it's upheld, because it wouldn't be in the public interest. How do you like that, guys? One SNP MSP, who's the former Rural Economy Secretary, Ferguson, he's been the subject of complaints that he bullied 3 different civil servants. When the investigation into his allegations were complete, both he and Sturgeon said, "Oh no, we can't possibly disclose the outcome of the complaints because he's bound by confidentiality." She claimed that she was doing it to protect the to further data protection of the complaint, as if anybody would care if the result of the complaints were made public. That's just ridiculous. So it's completely untrue. So to watch these guys making these terrible weak excuses for not disclosing results of complaints, and then to see the SNP MP saying, "Oh yes, we are against bullying in the workplace," just typical grade 1 SNP hypocrisy at its finest. So my nomination today is for every SNP member of Parliament who wore a blue ribbon in the House of Commons today.
It's hideous, isn't it? I mean, there's just such hypocrites, absolutely shocking levels of hypocrisy. I mean, what do you think of that, Rona?
Oh, it's quite unbelievable. I mean, I think that given that it's a party that they are not allowed to, or they're very suppressed at how much they can express themselves, to actually be worrying about bullying is quite unbelievable, isn't it? You know.
Well, he's got a history, hasn't he, as well? I mean, of Blackford of bullying.
Absolutely. Well, we know what he did
to Charles Kennedy.
Exactly.
Yes, I mean, his behaviour towards Charles Kennedy, I just thought was absolutely diabolical, and it should never be forgotten. Actually.
Quite.
Well, we don't forget things like that. We don't forget, that type of thing. And it's just ongoing. A party of bullies and sex pests. Coming up, my eyes are. Right. This week I have a perennial favourite. It is Nicola Sturgeon, who, rather than deal with the real problems that are all around us, country falling apart, no trains, sex pests, ferries, I don't know. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. She decided to go for a jolly in Italy. Sounds nice, lovely spot by Lake Como, called for the Global Women Leaders Summit in Bellagio. I looked it up. Lovely, very expensive. Did you have a look at it? It's really fantastic. But who are these world-leading women? That's what I wondered was. There's a picture of them here. Hold on a minute. Got this picture of them here. Here she is. Yeah, delighted to join this impressive group of women in Italy over the last 2 years to share experiences and consider how to drive faster progress on gender equality and climate change. Okay. Well, there she is there, and there's Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people that nobody really knows.
Jesus, so standing next to Hillary Clinton. Oh my God.
I know. Oh God.
My God.
I mean, that is bad enough. Share insights with Hillary Clinton. Now, let's just remember that Hillary Clinton of gender equality, Hillary Clinton's husband, was basically a sexual predator and a serial abuser of power. Not to say that Hillary Clinton herself, very much like Nicola Sturgeon, was into all kinds of shenanigans, which are becoming more and more exposed all the time in the United States, especially against her opponent, Donald Trump. And whether you like Mr. Trump or not, the fact that she organised a secret campaign to subvert the what they call the deep state to act against him is really quite shocking. Anyway, but She's over there talking about gender equality and climate change. I mean, those things aren't really very important when you can't get on a train to the job you don't have that doesn't pay you enough to live on. This is the thing. And people are looking at that and saying, well, she's off there in this lovely Lake Como next door to George Clooney, highlighting with highlighting whatever it is. That's when I made that word up. Highlighting with Hillary Clinton. And people are like, well, I can't pay my bills. What's going on here? Where are you? Where does the sex pest around the corner? He's coming after me, Mr. Grady. What's that? I mean, what do you guys think of this ridiculous nonsense?
Well, I mean, for starters, sharing a podium with Hillary Clinton's a big no-no for anyone, surely. But I mean, obviously, the woman who probably can't define what a woman is goes off and jets off to a women's conference about women in leadership. And you're like, well, what constitutes a woman? I go, well, I don't know, but I'm leading it. I mean, the lassie is, it's hypocrisy times a million. It doesn't get any more ridiculous than these folk. There's a gaggle of lunatics, they're cultists. I've had enough of these folk. And just while I'm here as well, there's a protest next week, Wednesday, Robertson Street, outside the Education Scotland offices. Just to let you know if anyone wants to attend that. 7 o'clock.
I'm sure that's good. You can go and do your protest. Just a completely out of touch Nicola Sturgeon now. We've got this bit. Her motto doesn't seem to be fake it till you make it. It's fake it till you break it. A world leader who breaks everything she touches instead. Okay. All right, Rona, you're the guest. So you can decide which one you think is best.
I've been to Lake Como. I have to say it's very, very beautiful. But I would like to see how much is this costing us all? Yes. Taxpayer. Yep. Who is funding this?
And then Centre. So I mean, I think they're probably paying for it, but
well, what's the feedback of all her trips going to America and everything? How are we gauging the feedback when we're already got a huge debt on, just as you rightly said, Niall, everyday living? So money is required by the taxpayer for education, for health, for potholes and all the rest of it. So what is the actual feedback financially for Scotland for her going to all these places and flying around the world, especially when she's so environmentally, trying to teach us all what we should be doing, and yet she's the very one taking off on planes and chauffeur-driven cars and all the rest of it. She does not set a very good example, really, does she?
Well, she's up for any jolly, but it certainly looks like it's a job interview, for her upcoming role as a women's ambassador for such and such big international organisation where she can jet around the world.
But as you rightly say, it's all actually coordinated at the exact time as she's required in her own country to solve all these problems. So she's really disappeared.
Yeah, well, hopefully she can perhaps maybe disappear a bit further. So anyway,
have to choose a Zoomer of the week, Rona. It's down to you.
Yeah, you have to choose, Rona. You have to choose.
Go on, Rona, you get to choose. Who is it?
So who's?
What's this now?
So you have to choose. It's either Mary Hunter, it's Nicola Sturgeon, or it's all the Westminster MPs, the SNP MPs.
Or whichever one you want.
Well, I think I'll go back to. I'll change my mind on this one and say Nicola Sturgeon, because I think she is the leader and she should be dealing with all of these problems.
Yes, another win for the winning team again.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Rona. We'll just leave you on here for the close down, whatever it is. Okay, so remember, we are live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I'd like to thank all the donors who are watching and who supported this to begin with, and who continue to support the podcast. Now, we said at the beginning, we have a new crowdfunding campaign, Destroy the Pretendy Ref, using billboards, social media and legal options. We need your support. We need your money to do this. Please make your monthly and one-time donations now if you can. It's very appreciated. Everything will be used to stop her plans. That's what we do. And you've seen what we've done in the past, so please do that. Big thank you to UK Union Voice, United Against Separation, all the pages that support us. And if you can do two things, please find a Majority podcast on Google, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and as I said, please do donate if you can. I'll leave you with the thought of the week. Why should we recognise their illegal pretendy ref when they don't even recognise the legal referendum?
Yeah.
That's it.
Great thought of the week.
We'll see you again next week, 7 p.m. It's good night from me.
That's good night
Good
for me.
evening.
All right. Take care, everyone, and we'll see
Good
you
night
soon.
from me next week, everyone.
Thank you to everyone watching.